back to 5 at 6:30, and joining us right now is Jessica Jackson Sloan. She is the mayor of Mill Valley, California.
And she is also the national director and co-founder of Cut 50, which works to make communities safer while reducing the number of people in our prisons and jails. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
You do have a lot on your plate, but we do want to hear more about Cut 50. How does it work?
So Cut 50 is a bipartisan national initiative to cut crime and cut our prison population. So we believe in making our communities safer by elevating solutions that don't actually lead to people being incarcerated.
So it's two-pronged approach, and some people may look at that and say, well, those don't run counter, or they may run counter to each other. So how do you go about doing that? How do you build these coalitions? How do you work together to bring the rates down on both sides?
Well, we know that there are models out there that work. For example, drug courts. They actually address the underlying issue as opposed to just using a one-size-fits-all, lock everybody up, tough-on-crime approach that has not worked historically. So what Cut 50 does is humanization and legislation. We tell the stories of people who have been impacted by the criminal justice system, including crime survivors, including law enforcement, including people who are actually incarcerated or have been incarcerated and their families. And then we also bring legislation both on the state and federal level.
What was the real push behind it? I know you're the mayor, Mill Valley. I got to imagine that has something to do with it. What is it you've noticed in your community or perhaps other communities around the country where you saw that this was a need that needed to be fulfilled in this certain way?
Well, I'll tell you, this issue is personal and professional for me. I'm a criminal defense attorney, but more importantly, I've been personally impacted by this issue. When I was 22 years old, long before I had my law degree, I found myself alone in a courtroom holding my 2-month-old daughter as I watched my husband get taken off to prison for a low-level drug offense. He spent 3.5 years there, and it absolutely ripped my family apart.
So when you look at the approach that the current administration is taking, Jeff Sessions has said they're going to come down pretty hard on drug offenses. I mean, you have states that are decriminalizing marijuana. They want to go opposite to that. You know, where do you balance the approach when you have the federal government saying one thing and local jurisdictions saying we want to go another way?
Well, I think that the Attorney General is actually out of step with his party. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a huge bipartisan coalition come together. We've seen Newt Gingrich step out and say the war on drugs didn't work. As recently as 2 weeks ago, right after Sessions' announcement, we've seen, Coke Industries come in. We've seen the American Conservative Union advocating for policies that keep families together as opposed to locking people up for drug offenses. So I think, what the AG is doing is actually out of step with his party, and I wouldn't say it's this administration. They really haven't spoken out on the issue that much. And what's interesting is we actually know that a lot of the counties that went red, that were full of Trump supporters, are the ones who have really been impacted by this opioid epidemic. About 50% of Trump supporters said they personally knew somebody who was incarcerated, and about 85% of them, according to the poll conducted at CPAC, said that they thought that criminal justice reform should be a top 3 priority issue. So there's a lot of support on the right and on the left for reform.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It's hashtag Cut 50.
Hashtag Cut 50.
If you want to look for it. And the website as well is on the screen right there, I believe.
Yep, there it is.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Jackson Sloan, good seeing you.
Thank you.
We're back after this.
K&G has great gifts for every dad. For the first time ever,